You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 42. This week on the show, we're talking bear essential duck hunting. We'll talk about what you need for those quick early morning or after work hunts. All right, welcome to the 42nd episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Palm. I appreciate you joining us this week. If you'd like to catch up with HP Outdoors, you can do so at www.hpoutdoors.com. You can also hook up with us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, all that good stuff. And if you prefer to reach out to us via email, you can do so at info@hpoutdoors.com. For all the Facebook users out there, we do have a listeners group. You can go on Facebook and search HP Outdoors Waterfowl or Waterfowl Listeners Group. Some combination of those will get you to our group, and you can request access, and we'll bring you in there, and you can chat directly with us and the other listeners of this group, and got a great community in there. So definitely check that out if you're on Facebook. And we've also got a newsletter that you can sign up through our website, and a survey on all of the show notes for every episode. If you'd like to provide some feedback on the show, we would certainly encourage you to do that. Joining me on the show this week, as he always tends to do, Dan Harushka. Dan, I know you're getting ready to kick off the duck season up there, but I've been seeing a lot of whitetail posts on your Instagram feed lately. I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, we do start Saturday, so until Saturday, I can go out back and sit in a tree stand, and currently I just got out of the woods. I'm wearing face paint and talking to you. I'm in my glory.
Good times. Pretty fired up about that, naturally. Well, great. Well, I'm glad you're able to get out there and chase some whitetail. I know you got some good bucks out there on the property, so hopefully we'll be able to share a good story on a connection with that too. But we got a great show lined up this week. We are going to cover a little bit of news around the waterfowl world. We've got our Ask HP question. We're going to profile this week the sandhill crane. We've had a lot of people asking for that, so we finally got around to getting that one taken care of. As we always do, we have our retriever training quick tip with Bart Ramsey of Southern Oak Kennels, and then we're going to have our main discussion of this week's episode, which is bear essential duck hunts or goose hunts. But essentially what the idea around this segment is going to be, how do you set yourself up for success when you've got an hour before work or you got 45 minutes after work? Those quick pop in, try to make something happen in a short amount of time sort of hunts. So we're going to talk about tips and techniques and that, and really kind of focus on, how to be most prepared gear wise, what you need, what you don't need, all that kind of stuff. So really good convo coming with that stuff. And I think that's one that Dan, you do a lot of early morning, kind of quick hunts before work. So I know that this is a topic that's sort of near and dear, to you.
Yeah, I try and get out as much as I can, and when daylight savings hits and I have an hour before work, if I can get the dog in the truck and get her out in the swamp or out at the lake or out in a field, whatever it may be, then I'm going to try and capitalize on it. So, you can sleep in during the off season. That's kind of how I feel about it. So I try and get out and do what I love to do.
Absolutely. So we're going to cover that in due time. But before we do, let's go ahead and get through some of the other stuff that we've got on the show this week. And let's start it off with some waterfowl news. So, I'm reading through, I get a lot of different waterfowl magazines, and I look at a lot of different waterfowl related websites and things. And, I found a story that really kind of caught my eye and kind of took me aback. But basically the story outlines that the federal government has paid a Maryland-based company nearly $320,000 since 2009 to keep geese off of government property. Basically, the company is using border collies to chase the birds away, sort of as like an on-call sort of ad-needed basis. It's a National Park Service that's hired a goose removal company for $28,000 per year, and they rid various areas around the Washington D.C. monuments and sort of other areas within the D.C. region. But the company is required to keep 95% of the geese away 100% of the time, according to the Washington Post. It sort of takes me back to the Anchorman. It's like, 50% of the time it works 100% of the time, or whatever it is. But I just don't see how that's a really attainable goal. You know how hard it is to get geese off of certain areas and things like that. But heck, for $28,000 a year, I'd certainly give it a go. And I know there's probably a lot of guys out listening to this show that would likely give it a go as well.
That seems crazy, but the collies probably do run them off quite a bit. I don't. That's like some of these areas with too many deer, and they send snipers in at night, and they're paying thousands of dollars. Why don't you just sell more tags, let hunters go in there and take care of the problem? I don't know. It is what it is. Well,
this story is actually referring to the DC monuments, so
yeah, I guess
you can't really shoot there, but. I just, it's interesting to see how that's effective, and those are probably taxpayer dollars right there at work. So,
Well, I got something out of, and believe it or not, it's positive this week. So, how about it? Coming out of Saginaw, Michigan. Now, listen to this. Anyone in Michigan, state offers prizes to waterfowl hunters in Wetland Wonders contest. Now, up for grabs. It seems like Mr. Fred Zink was a big part of this, but up for grabs are hunting prize packages for 7 hunters valued at $1,500, and the packages include a golden ticket that's good for one first choice pick at a managed waterfowl hunt area for the 2016-2017 season, non-reserved. Other prizes include a new Winchester SXP 12 gauge, Zink custom duck and goose calls, AVNX mallard and goose decoys, and other waterfowl hunting gear. So, what is this little contest here? It's pretty crazy. To be entered to win, hunters must hunt at least 3 of 7 Wetland Wonders waterfowl hunting areas scattered across Michigan's Lower Peninsula between October 10th and January 31st of 2016. So pretty much this contest is you have to go and hunt these places, which, let's see here. The areas were created in the 1960s to provide waterfowl hunting opportunities, and are still managed today to provide waterfowl habitat for nesting and migrating birds. So I've never been there. I've never heard of them, but I would assume that there is some good hunting there. And let's just run through some. There's Allegan County, Tuscola County, St. Clair County, Muskegon County, Bay County, Monroe and Wayne counties, and Saginaw County. And these are all, state game areas. To be entered into the contest, participants must hunt at least 3 of 7 southern Michigan Wetland Wonders and submit a punch card entry form. Hunters can increase their chances by hunting at more than 3 areas. If you hunt at 4 areas, you earn 2 entries, 5 areas for 3 entries, and 6 areas for 4 entries. If you hunt all 7 Wetland Wonders areas, will earn the hunter 5 contest entries. Those hunting all 7 managed waterfowl hunt areas automatically win a prize. So if you have nothing else to do, drive around to these different counties and go hunt. So, there's some prizes to be won. Who doesn't want a new shotgun? Seems like, they want more hunters out in those areas. And I wish they did that around here, because I'd go hit up those places, I think.
Yeah, that's surprising to hear that, because, a lot of areas, pretty much all you hear about is how the public land is overrun and overcrowded, and, the hunting isn't great. So that must not be the case in these areas. And if they want to incentivize people to try to, some different areas, I think that's awesome. And I hope that, there's guys out there that take advantage of that, because it sounds like a pretty cool prize pack. I would do a lot to have a legitimate shot of winning a new shotgun or something like that. So especially if it's something I'm going to be doing anyway.
If you hunt all 7 areas, you win a prize. I don't know what it is, but all of them sound like good places. Fish Point State Wildlife Area, Point Moyley State Game Area. There's some definite Indian names in there, but it's the one that sounds like they would want to stay away from, or just the name of it, Muskegon County Wastewater Facility. But it's being it's being managed for waterfowl, but who knows what that means. So, go out, win yourself a shotgun, and if you don't want it, then send it to PA or Virginia, because we'll take it.
Yeah. Well, that's great news, Dan. I appreciate you being a little more upbeat and not a downer this week. So that's like 3 weeks in a row or something, I think, for you. I think we can officially call that a streak.
Yep.
Nice work.
Yep.
Nice work.
I'll look for a good one next week.
I'm sure it'll be nice and doom and gloom. Looking forward to that. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to this week's Ask HP question of the week.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This week's Ask HP question is brought to you by Higdon Outdoors. Quality service innovation, that's Higdon Outdoors. Check out HigdonDecoys.com for all your waterfowl decoy needs. All right, Dan, this week, this question, as we've tended to kind of do, we've been pulling a lot of these from our Facebook listener group. This week's question comes from Chris Smith, and he wants to know if we have any tips for any kind of late afternoon hunting situations. Chris has an opportunity to get out for a little bit of time after work, and he wants to know what kind of tips, do we have for those to be successful hunts. And this kind of does sort of dovetail into the main discussion of this week's show. But what do you think, Dan? What are some tips that you got for that late afternoon hunt?
There's a lot of spots around here that I could probably try and race out of work and get set up, but most of the time, come 5:30, the birds are already out feeding where they want to be. So, what I like to do is just know where they're feeding at. If I go and scout after work, I know where they're feeding at. I know where they're heading back to, to roost. So what we try and do is try and get in between those spots, and most of the time we're pretty successful pulling some in just running traffic. So, if you know that they're out in fields, or if you know that they're getting out a little later, if you can go and get set up, then, bust tail out of work and get set up, and you might have yourself a killer hunt. If not, use the apps, use your Google Earth and find their flyways and try and, obtain permission in between it, get in a field in between, in their flyway and try and pull them in. We do that quite often. And, if worst case scenario, if you know where they're going back to stay, if it's towards the end of your season, you can catch them coming back to where they roost. So there's a couple options there, but like I said, we run traffic, we get in fields in between, get set up, and we do pretty well pulling them in that way. How about you?
Well, I don't know what you're doing tracking that crap on Google Maps. Or Google Earth, whatever you said. If you're not using the DeLorme EarthMate app for this exact purpose, you are completely missing the boat, and you have not been listening to this show, because this is precisely what I've been talking about. When you see birds feeding somewhere, you drop a waypoint. When you find those roosting spots, you drop a waypoint. So when you find yourself out of work and you're trying to get set up on a situation like you're describing, those patterns are already there for you. So you know exactly where you need to be, because the data that you've been tracking is right there, and it's accumulative. So definitely an easy way to help you kind of keep it all straight. You can obviously pick up that app by using the HP Outdoors discount code, all cap letters, HP Outdoors, save you $10 on the app. So if you haven't done that yet, definitely do. For me, the after work hunt really is probably more of just a jump shooting situation for me. It's my spots and where we're at. I have to factor in a drive time. So I don't get a lot of, there's no racing around. I maybe get a really finite number of minutes, or, 30 minutes maybe, to where I can just, try to ambush a spot where I know birds have been hanging or what have you. And, find a creek that I can walk the bank and try to catch a couple woodies, traveling up and down or something like that. But, for the most part, that's really what I keep it to. So definitely the jump shooting can be successful when you, like you said, when the birds are already out where they want to be feeding. You might be able to get on a good stock kind of ambush situation there and pick up a couple birds there at the end of the afternoon. So appreciate Chris sending his question into the show. Chris, send us a direct message through email, info@hpoutdoors.com, or on social media, and we'll send you out a free barrel decal for helping us out. If you'd like to have us address a question on the show, feel free to submit it to us through any channel that you'd like. And if we use it on the show, we'll also send you a free HP Outdoors barrel decal. So thanks for everyone for helping out with the show. All right, Dan. So we've been getting questions, or not questions, more of an increased demand for the sandhill crane profile. So we decided enough is enough, and we're going to do it this week. So let's go ahead and roll right into it. This week's sandhill crane duck profile.
Alrighty, the sandhill crane. Let's talk a little bit about measurements. You're talking about the length being 47.2 inches and a wingspan coming in at 7.5 feet. And the weight is 119 to 172 ounces. And relative size, about the same size, but considerably bulkier than the great blue heron, but smaller than a whooping crane. And just some cool facts about the sandhill crane. The call is loud, rolling, trumpeting sound whose unique tone is a product of anatomy. The cranes have long tracheas that coil into the sternum and help the sound develop a lower pitch and harmonics that add richness. So a little bit about their little trachea there. And let's go. The oldest sandhill crane on record was at least 36 years and 7 months old. And that was originally banded in Wyoming in 1973, and it was found in New Mexico in 2010. The behavior of the sandhill cranes, they mate for life, they choosing their partners based on dancing displays. Displaying birds stretch their wings, pump their heads, bow, and leap into the air, which kind of reminds me of Josh when he was at Penn State. But although each female usually lays 2 eggs, only one nestling typically survives to fledge. Mated pairs and their juvenile offspring stay together all through the winter until the about 9 to 10 month old juvies finally separate from their parents the following spring. And during migration in winter, the family units group together with other families and non-breeders, forming loose roosting and feeding flocks, which, we'll catch some of those in between here. And in some places numbering in the tens of thousands. And eggs, nestlings, and injured or sick adults may be hunted by fox, coons, coyotes, wolves, bobcats, crows, ravens, eagles, and owls. And cranes attack aerial predators by leaping into the air and kicking their feet forward. And they threaten terrestrial predators by spreading their wings and hissing, eventually resorting to kicking. So these birds with a 7.5 foot wingspan just kind of spread out like if you're being attacked by a bear and try and scare them off that way.
Yeah, kind of a wild deal there, as far as everything that they go through to the courtship process and all that sort of thing. But as far as their feeding habits, they tend to feed in, on land or in shallow marshes where the plants are sort of coming up out of the water. And, basically the diet consists heavily of seeds and cultivated grains. They'll also feed on, small invertebrates and things like that. Non-migratory populations will eat, insects, snails, reptiles, amphibians, small mammals, nesting birds, seeds, berries, sort of those types of things. As far as the population of sandhill cranes in general, their population numbers are strong, and they've been increasing at about 5% per year since 1966. They score a number 11 out of 20 on the Continental Concern score and are not considered to be a species that are of concern in North America. However, there's some areas that there is a little bit of concern. The Mississippi sandhill crane, which is a subspecies, is endangered, and basically largely from conversion of their wet pine habitat into plantations is essentially what's been detrimental to that population. There's another isolated population in Florida that is of concern, but it's not presently on the endangered list. So the sandhill crane populations do recover slowly, as you mentioned, because the breeding pairs only typically have one chick per year that survives to fledging. So the future of the sandhill crane is mainly tied to, the fate of their habitat. And, obviously why a lot of these conservation organizations are so focused on these habitat initiatives, because like many, migratory waterfowl and things, sandhill cranes depend greatly on the success of that habitat. It's particularly important to conserve the wetlands in the regions of these non-migratory populations and in the staging and wintering areas of the larger migratory flocks. So, sandhill crane is a cool little deal, man. It's a neat bird. It's cool to see these big harvests, cool hunts and Facebook pictures and things like that. It's definitely something that I'd like to get into at some point. And, I think it's another thing that we'll probably expound a little bit more on the show as far as hunting techniques and things like that. But for this week, that's your duck profile. All right, Dan, that was a fun one. I haven't had one that I was looking forward to as much as that one, just because the sandhill crane does some cool stuff. It's a unique deal, and it's just sort of fun to get outside the box a little bit with those. So yeah, everyone has been pressuring to do it for us to do that. Thank you. That was fun. Yeah. And the pure size, 7.5 foot wingspan. It's a decent sized bird. And like I said, we've been seeing them more and more around here, it seems like, but still no season. But like you said, we need to do a couple of tips and techniques on hunting them, and probably have Mr. Palumbo back on here to take care of that for us, because he enjoys that aspect of the hunt. Yeah. Yep, for sure. And Lord knows I have virtually no experience, or not virtually, I have no experience hunting sandhill cranes. So we're going to have to find somebody that does to help us out on the show. But I think Mr. Palumbo would be a very good option for that down the road. All right. So I've noticed lately in the Facebook group that there's been a lot of questions coming up about retrievers and questions about just training techniques and gear and things like that. And, this week's retriever training quick tip, brought to you by Southern Oak Kennels and Barton Ramsey. He covers a topic that I think a lot of guys have questions on, and maybe don't necessarily take the time to maybe research it as thoroughly as they should. So let's go ahead and play this week's quick tip and talk about it on the other side.
Hey guys, this is Barton Ramsey with Southern Oak Kennels, coming to you this week with your retriever training quick tip of the episode. I actually want to talk about something that happens before training. This episode has to do with the bare essentials of duck hunting, waterfowling. And so I want to look at some of the bare essentials that we should be looking for when we are choosing a Labrador or another type of gun dog to purchase. This is mostly having to do with Labradors, but still important with other breeds as well. And this has to do with the health testing and health screening. I get a lot of questions about this, since we are breeders, and people ask, do you do health tests, and do you have a health guarantee? And obviously we do all of that. We do have a guarantee, of course, but a lot of people don't know what specific health issues to look for. And so I just kind of want to give you the bare bones. These are the things that you really need to see when you're choosing a pup. And I want to give a precursor to this. Just because all of these things are in order doesn't mean that your dog is going to be perfectly healthy. But what you are doing is you're ensuring yourself that you are setting yourself up for the best chance of success with a healthy dog. So the first and most important thing in Labrador Retrievers is going to be the hips. Hip dysplasia plagues the breed. Even if we breed dogs with just good hips, you're still going to wind up, some say, as high as a 20% chance. Most people say somewhere around 10% chance of having hip dysplasia in some of the puppies. And so it definitely happens, but you want to see a hip score on your pups, or at least hips that have been checked by an orthopedic veterinarian, hopefully scored with the BVA if they're a British dog in the UK, or with the OFA or pin hip here in the United States. Then you want to check second after hips for eyes. Labradors are prone to a lot of eye issues, everything from cataract to a couple of genetic disorders we'll talk about. So you want to see that they've had a clear eye certificate, hopefully recently. If the dog is up in age, you run into the problem of how often do you check the eyes. Well, the best thing to do would be every year. The problem is, if your 7-year-old comes down with cataracts, then you've probably already bred her a few times anyway, and so you just hope for the best at that point. But when they're young, we check them every year to make sure they don't have any sort of eye malformities. After eyes, there are some genetic issues that deal with the eyes that you want to make sure that you're not going to buy a pup from breeding that might produce affected dogs, and that would be PRA, which is progressive retinal atrophy, and CNM, which is centronuclear myopathy. Both of these are very difficult issues when it comes to a Labrador that's affected. It will cause blindness in your dog, and so you want to make sure that both of the parents are either clear or one of the parents is a carrier and the other one is clear. Neither one needs to be affected, of course, and you do not need to buy if both are a carrier. Speaking of genetic issues, there's also EIC, which is exercise-induced collapse. This is triggered by several different things in dogs, and when dogs are affected, they'll be out in the field, and whenever the trigger hits, they'll collapse. They'll lose function, usually in their rear legs. And while it may not kill dogs per se, if your dog's out swimming and has an episode, they could drown. It's not a fun thing to have if you're talking about a dog in the field. Beyond this, you definitely have elbows. Elbows are a little bit trickier. They're harder to get a clear picture of an x-ray for, and you don't see quite as much dysplasia, but it is important to know that the dogs have healthy and tested x-rayed elbows. And then beyond that, there's a new genetic disorder that is becoming more and more prevalent called SD2, skeletal dysplasia 2, which is dwarfism in Labradors. While it does not affect their health in any way, you'll wind up with a dog that's a little bit shorter, an inch, 2 inches, sometimes 3 inches shorter than normal. And then just a few tips for those of you who do take young puppies home. If you want to avoid some of these problems, especially hips, don't let them stay on concrete all the time. Give them something soft to sleep on and walk on throughout the day. Don't let them jump in and out of a pickup truck until they're fully developed. Pick them up, help them to the ground. Don't let them jump up and down on concrete, and don't take them for long, extended runs. Try to limit your exercise. Do a lot of swimming and less long-distance marks on land. If you're going to do land, make sure it's in a hay field or a crop field and not on concrete or really hard, packed-in dirt. Just be smart about it and realize that those hips are going to be developing through 2 years, and so you want to do your best to protect them and to keep any dysplasia from happening on your own watch. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, as always, look us up at www.southernoakkennels.com or ask us on the HP Outdoors Podcast Facebook page. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. I hope you have a great week opening up your seasons and kill lots of birds. Have a good one.
All right, we'd like to thank Barton Ramsey and Southern Oak Kennels for their support of this show and providing us with this week's quick retriever training quick tip. Definitely check out Southern Oak Kennels across all social media platforms and as well as on their website. There's a great Southern Oak Kennels Society group on Facebook that you can go in and ask questions, and he's also part of the listeners group that we have, so he also addresses questions in there from time to time as well. So thanks again to Barton. Dan, what do you think? I mean, obviously the show today is we're talking about some of the essential things when it comes to hunting, but Barton hits on some of the essential things about puppy selection and things that you really need to kind of vet out before you make your selection on not only the breeder but the puppy that you're buying itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think he always hits on the points that he's going for, and he knows a ton about all of them. But it's such a tough situation because especially if you have family with you and you're looking at puppies, and I think one of the hardest things to do is go and look at a puppy, hold it, play with it, and not take it home right then and there. And it's definitely very easy to get caught up in the whole puppy love situation and just want to take him home. But I mean, you definitely, if you're looking for a hunting dog, you definitely need to get the background on them. And I advise people, if you have a lot of questions or more questions than what Barton just went over, get in contact with him and see exactly what some of that stuff is. He's talking about new genetic diseases that are coming out that, you're getting kind of a dwarf dog. It might be a few inches, but that might be something that you really need to pay attention to. And, there's probably not a lot of research done on it yet, but just to have that in the back of your head. And then, of course, hips and eyes and everything else. Like, you need to know what you're looking at when you go and pick up a puppy. And, I know when I got Kimber, all that stuff was certified, even though, Barton mentioned that it's not a guarantee, which it's not, but if you have lineage where it's not a problem, then there's a good chance that it's not going to be a problem. And, my other dog, Cody, is, we picked him up from a pound pretty much, and, brought him home, and he just turned 2 a little bit ago. And, there's nothing worse than seeing a family member go through some kind of pain, and he definitely has bad hips. So, if you're going to spend, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 on a dog for hunting, the worst thing you want, or the last thing you want, is to see them going through problems such as, struggling to get up out of bed or off the floor. And, he had a lot of great tips about not running them on concrete and helping them in and out of beds of trucks. And, it's just, he's full of knowledge, and he had a ton of great points in that tip.
Yeah, lots of good takeaways from this week's episode. So thank you again to him. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And it's now time, Dan, for us to roll on to this week's main segment of the show, Bear Essential Duck Hunting Tips, Techniques, and Gear. All right, Dan. So this is one that we've talked about doing for a little while and haven't got around to yet, but it's one that I think that can go kind of 2 ways. So when I think about this, I think about the guy who's going to go out before work or after work, like we've sort of been talking about. But I also think about the new hunter, the guy who's just kind of getting into waterfowl hunting and might be a little overwhelmed by the amount of gear that it looks like it takes to be successful in waterfowl hunting. You turn on every TV show and all you see is trailers full of decoys, big trucks, dog, auto-loading shotguns, blinds, you name it, calls, whatever it is, camo. So we wanted to kind of dumb it down a little bit and just say, hey, you don't need all of that stuff to be successful, whether you're just going into the field for 30, 45 minutes, or whether you're just going into the field for the first time and you're just trying to get on a couple of ducks and, sort of get your feet wet. So that's kind of what this week's main piece of the show is going to be focused on. And Dan, why don't you go ahead and kick it off for us and get us started in the conversation here.
And I don't even think that it's dumbing it down, because a lot of, just myself and to speak here, probably 75% of my hunts are these quick hunts. So, we don't get to load up the trailer every time and, spend 4 hours out in the field. It's usually a couple hour hunt before work or after work. And, like you said, it's kind of up my alley here. But, when I was doing a little bit of research for this, I came across just a forum, and guys were talking about, what do you need? And they were talking to the new hunter, and the one guy, he said, you need 2 things. You need a loving wife and deep pockets. So I thought that was pretty funny. But, going on with what we talk about, I've talked about it before, but just being legal, the number one thing is your license and duck stamp. And, depending if you do an e-stamp or whatever, if you print it out, make sure that it's laminated, make sure that, it's not going to get wet and shrivel up and you end up getting in trouble with that. So, the first thing I'd say is make sure that you are legal in all aspects.
Yeah. 2 things I want to say to echo that. One, what you said with that forum pretty much is spot on. I mean, you do have to, if you're going to be a serious waterfowl hunter or hunter in general, you have to have a very understanding wife and family that understands, how much time it's going to take. But the other thing I'd add on, not so much the deep pockets, but I would add on that if you're going to take on waterfowl hunting, you need to have, I don't know what the proper way to say this, patience, thick skin, tempered expectations. I don't know. But I mean, if you think that you're going to go out the first time you do it and there's going to be mallards just backpedaling over your decoys to where you can't even, keep them out of your hole, that kind of thing, you're probably in for a rude awakening. It's just not that easy typically. So, don't be frustrated kind of early on if the success isn't quite to the level that you thought it would be. I mean, if you go out and you get a 30-minute flight of some woodies right off the bat and you knock a couple down, that's a win in my book. That's a successful hunt. It's not the kind of hunt you're going to see on TV, but it's a great hunt nonetheless. So I think that's something to sort of keep in mind. But to echo on top of the legal portion of that, you're spot on. I mean, waterfowl hunting, unlike any other sport that I've ever done in the outdoors, is so regulation intensive. For a new hunter, oh my God, it can be overwhelming, to think about, well, I can only kill these particular species, and during certain times of the year I can't kill that one, and how do I know, and how do I identify them, and I can't use certain types of shot, and but I've only done small game hunting before, and good Lord, if your state has blind laws, that's a whole nother thing, but I got to buy stamps and all this stuff. So that in of itself can be a lot to really get over. So I lean heavily on the Virginia regulation app on my phone. I pull that out all the time to see, where season dates are, all this kind of stuff, reference blind laws, things of that nature, just always sort of refreshing my memory and almost studying that kind of stuff, because it seems like it changes from year to year almost at times. And if you hunt different states or things like that, it can make it even more of a clouded, thing. So just be legal, make sure you know what you're doing. If you're doing, some of these sneak hunts like I was talking about, or you're jump shooting some spots, make sure you're not too close to roads or not too close to buildings and things like that. So where you go up and you have a great hunt and you harvest a couple birds and you're feeling good about yourself, and then you come back to the truck and and the law is sitting there ready to write you a citation because you overlooked a regulation that you shouldn't have. So definitely agree with you there, Dan. You got to be legal.
Right. And going, you have the regulation app, and usually, when PA comes out with the regulations and even bag limits and whatnot, I'll just take a screenshot of that on my phone and, put it in my favorites. So, if we're in a hunt, and say last year, we got into a couple pintails, which that doesn't happen around here very often. So the first thing I did, I dropped one pintail, and I was like, what, I need to make sure if that's a 2 or 3 bird limit there on the pintails. And, I looked it up and was good in that department. But that's, a regulation book or app or something, just making sure you're legal. I double check and triple check, because the worst thing I want is to get back to the truck, like you said, have the lawman sitting there and him take your guns or license or whatever it may be. But, it could get sticky there. But, and the next thing I want to talk about, obviously a gun and shells. And this is another thing, on a Bear Central hunt, if we're going out, say first day of goose, and we're laying in a field, I'm going to take a blind bag. I'm going to have all my coffee, snacks, all kinds of stuff in there, probably, 2 boxes of shells. If I'm doing a Bear Central hunt, I'm going to take an ammo belt. It might hold 20 shells, but it's something that I don't have to lug around a whole bag, and it's, it makes you more mobile. It's probably plenty of shells. Hopefully it's plenty of shells, and just something that makes it a little easier to get in and out of the field with.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else out there can relate to this, but I'm the type of guy where I hate having stuff in my pockets. Like if I'm out and I have my wallet, my keys, and I got this and I got that, and I got all this different stuff in my pockets, I just feel like I'm waiting to lose something. And that gives me anxiety. And that's definitely something that I don't want to have when I'm out in the field, trying to be stealthy and trying to get on birds quickly. So I'm like you, I'm dropping the bag. I use an ammo belt every hunt anyway, but I'm definitely using it on a quick hunt. Holds 25 shells. That's more than enough that you're going to shoot. But even if you've got the ability to, you may even want to consider, downsizing your gun. If you typically carry a 12 gauge auto loader, something like that, you may want to break out the pump, or a 20 gauge, something that's going to be a little bit lighter, easier to maneuver. If you're doing a sneak hunt or something like that, chances are you're not, you might only get 1 or 2 shots. So it might pay to have a little bit lighter gun that you can kind of control a little bit easier, something to that effect. But, I'm with you on the sense that you don't need to bring the bag, because chances are you're not even going to have enough time to enjoy anything that you bring in there. So take the minimum that you think you're going to need and, kind of go from there. But, if you need more than 25 shells in a 30 minute to an hour hunt, there's probably some time that you should probably take that hour that you're spending in the field and spend on the range, worrying about figuring out how to get on target and that kind of thing. But, yeah, Bear Essentials, lightest as you can get, pack it in, pack it out, nice and quick. Nothing that you don't, that you don't absolutely need. Again, we're focusing on this is essential stuff here.
Yeah, and I guess I should have done a little preface going into this, but before work, we have a couple lakes around here. We can hunt a couple private ponds and stuff like that. But most of my hunts, I'm walking, say, 100 to 600 yards to get to my spot. So the last thing I want to do is make 2 trips. I'm not going to make 2 trips. So that's kind of when I'm talking about what I'm doing, that's kind of how I'm hunting. So just to go with that. But moving forward, I'm gonna have my waders. If you're new to the game, or most guys hunt or fish, you're gonna have waders, and that depends on your hunting situation too, and if you have a dog that is gonna make retrieves for you. And we make jokes about my waders having holes in it, but you do most of the time walk through jaggers or some fallen trees, so that is just something that will eventually happen to you.
Yeah, well, and another thing to consider too is you can do these quick hunts and not necessarily walk. I mean, you can have the kayak on the back of your boat or your canoe or something where you just dump that in and you go, and if that's the case, again, depending on if you have a dog or how you plan to retrieve your birds or how much wading you anticipate on doing, but you might be able to get away with just having your hip boots, or even just like your muck, your knee highs, depending on the situation and where you're going to go. But that's the point that you're making. If you're not going to be standing in flooded timber or need to get up over your hips into your waders, you might be able to save yourself some bulk and some sweat and some ease to just throw on some lighter stuff and, go about it that route. But
that's one of the best things about having a dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Throw your mucks on and, sit on the edge of the lake and let them do the work. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the ideal scenario, but that's the point. Evaluate where you're going to be and what you're going to need. And just because you're used to throwing the 5 millimeter heavy duty, Cabela Super Mag, waders on because it's cold out, you might not need that if you're going to sit for 15 minutes and walk back, and you're never going to step foot in the water kind of thing, because your dog's going to do the retrieve. So definitely think that through before you decide what waders you're going to load up.
For sure. I think the next one would be debatable, and that would be a game tote, and that's something that easy enough to, put your ducks on it, throw it over your shoulder and carry out. But, if you have a decoy bag or anything else, it's easy enough to, throw in with the decoys or carry out by hand. So that one's debatable.
Yeah, for me this year, typically I've always had a game tote in my bag that I carry with me, but I rarely would ever use it. Now my bag has a game tote built into it, using the Sitka full choke pack. But again, in these types of hunts, I'm not going to have that bag, so I can't see myself taking a pocket or anything to carry, a tote. I would probably bank on the fact that I'm not going to shoot, 6 ducks or 5 or 7 geese or whatever the limit is. If I get out of there with 2 or 3 ducks, I'd probably be pretty happy with the evening, and I'd be comfortable with just snatching them up, by a leg or something and carrying them out that route. But again, if that's something that you anticipate, if you're going to go in there and you're going to bang them up pretty good real quick, then you might want to make sure that you got enough, you got a comfortable way to get them out.
Yep. And this one, I think, we differ opinions on this too, but decoys and the decoy situation. And this is pretty much no matter where I go, and excluding jump shooting, but I'm going to have some type of jerk rig set up. So if it's going to be a minimum of, 3 decoys, most likely 4. And on most hunts, if I'm going out to the lake or somewhere like that, I'm going to have a dozen duck decoys on my back. And that's just how I roll.
So I would definitely say that a dozen decoys for me personally is way too many. If you're carrying 12 on your back with Texas rigs, for me with the shotgun in the other hand, I would feel pretty bogged down. So I would limit that to no more than 6 if you feel that you need decoys. I kind of like what you're talking about where, you bring a jerk rig. So you've got 3-4 decoys on there that you can add some motion if you want to. But my thought on these quick hunts is that if you're going to pop into these spots, it's worth your time to know and have scouted that spot to know if there's birds there or not. If you're not sure that there's birds there, that 45 minutes or an hour that you take and you go out there and sit and you don't see anything, in my opinion, again, it's great to get outside and I'm not discounting that, just, the act of hunting and how refreshing that can be. But that hour is probably better spent scouting other spots and finding out, okay, birds aren't hitting this spot, but I'm seeing them hit this other spot. So that's the spot I'm going to hit tomorrow after work. My point is, if you scout it out properly, you don't even need decoys because the birds want to be there anyway. So you need to just get in there and get covered up real good and concealed so that you get 1 flight, 2 flights of ducks, and you drop a couple out of there and you got a successful hunt. You can get out of there kind of low impact. So my point is, if you properly scout, there's birds there, you probably don't need decoys anyway. If you're hunting a spot where you're not sure if there's birds there and you're throwing them out, like you've talked about, Dan, where you're trying to pull in traffic, I understand, getting decoys, particularly motion decoys, to kind of help you accomplish that. But, for me, jump shooting, things like that, I think you're going to get more bang for your buck kind of going that route. But again, everywhere's different. And, obviously, we've differed on a lot of these items, and you may differ with us even further, but that's kind of why we have these discussions, because for everybody, what we consider to be essential is going to be different. So that's kind of the beauty of it.
Right. And I do, with a lot of these hunts, if I'm going out to the lake and, if I only have 45 minutes, like you said, I will get set up on some points to where I can see a lot of the other spots on the lake. And I do that if I can take my boat on the weekend, or if I, can take a half day vacation and can take the boat out and get out on the lake to where I need to be. These short little hunts do prove to be good, scouting trips as well. So, like you said, 2 or 3 ducks, that's a bonus, but, there is, a method to the madness and as far as the scouting goes, and it gets you time out there and, can work with the dog too. So it's all good stuff. And, another thing that I know you don't like putting stuff in your pockets, but I think this one is essential, is to have some sort of multi-tool. You never know. You just never know. You might have to take your gun apart. You might need something to pop out a pin. You might need to, dig mud out of the end of it, whatever it may be. But, I have a little Gerber, Bear Grylls edition multi-tool that I usually, always have on a belt or somewhere in my jacket.
Yeah, I agree with you on the multi-tool, and I think it's important because, one, you can keep it on your belt, so it's low impact to you. But two, really where this is going to come into play on a quick hunt like this, it's going to be utilized in a safety situation. You clogged your barrel with mud, your gun's jammed, you can't unload it properly. Something like that can be a dangerous situation, and I'm never one that's ever going to recommend that you cut a corner when it can impact your safety in the field. So having a belt, a tool on your belt is, it's basically non-existent. There's no good reason not to do it. Fully think that that's something that is an essential piece of your gear. Not to mention, you never know what you're going to find yourself in, what kind of situation you're going to get yourself into when you're out in the woods. Even if you're going a couple 100 yards off the road or from your truck, things happen, and you may find yourself in a really tough spot for whatever reason. And whatever you can have with you at a minimum to help you navigate or deal with that situation is something that I would always encourage. So definitely a multi-tool. Can't really think of a good reason why not to have one.
Speaking about safety, just on Facebook, I saw floating around where a guy's barrel, I don't know if it was packed with mud or something, but the barrel ended up exploding. I guess it was more the gun, because the dude's hand, well, no, it was the barrel because it was his extended hand. Like half of his hand was gone, and his buddy had BBs all through his chest. Did you see that?
I didn't see that, but I will tell you that every other hunt, when I have my full pack with me, I carry, like a wire brush on a flexible steel cable that I can, clean my barrel in the event that something happens. And please, if you're listening to this show and you drop your gun in the mud at some point during a hunt, do not even think about firing that gun again until you have completely stripped the barrel off the gun and you've ensured that there is absolutely no obstructions in that barrel before you even think about using it again. This is just common sense safety approaches of handling a firearm. I know guys have done this before and they blow in the top and they stick their finger in there and we're good. They reload. But that's how things happen, like you're describing on Facebook. So, you can't afford to be careless in a situation like that. So you're better off, if you don't have the means to clean your gun out properly, you're better off to pack it in and call it a day, because I can guarantee, these guys that had this happen to them, they're not going to be making it back out to the field anytime soon.
No. And it was, the guy's chest was just absolutely peppered, and it makes you quiver. And like you said, ensure that there's nothing in that barrel, because it's not worth it. It's definitely not worth it. So, all right, moving on. The next thing I'd say, and like you mentioned, there are some times where I throw my canoe in the back of my truck, and even before work, there's some canals and whatnot between lakes here that I do hunt and can get to very quickly. So, I always will have some zip ties with me. And I do have some camo netting that I'll either, string up on some trees or, just over the boat, making sure that there is an element of being hidden. And, you can brush that in. So, it's not prime, but it's definitely better than just sticking out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And, I can't disagree with your points on that. But for me personally, again, this is one where we would differ, because I'm of the opinion that if I'm going to hunt a spot and I've only got 45 minutes to do it, I don't want to spend 5 or 10 of those minutes flopping netting around or like trying to trim down a bush to get some good concealment or cover my canoe. I want to have something in place there. So I would make every attempt ahead of time to get out there, throw a little natural blind together, or just something to give you enough cover to where you can get in there and make those 45 minutes productive. My goal would be, when I show up to the spot, I show up and I'm ready to hunt moment one that I get there, not after I get, the dog situated and I got to brush him a little spot and brush the blind and get the canoe squared away. I want to try to get as much of that work done as ahead of time as possible. And it's the same way as kind of like, archery hunting, for example. When you get a quick hunt, a lot of times it's easier to go to that lock-on stand that you've already got established rather than load up the climber, take it with you, find the tree, put it on, climb up, pull your bow, get set. It's just easier sometimes to jump in something that's already established. So that's kind of my mindset there, but I certainly can't disagree with you taking some lightweight, easy measures to sort of cover yourself up and make sure that you're concealed good, on any hunt. But, maybe some planning could help you out with that too.
Yeah. And another tip, if you are hunting public land or state game lands, make sure you know the laws about cutting any trees or anything like that as far as using it for brush or a blind. So, there's a lot, in Pennsylvania, you're not allowed to cut trees on game lands. So just make sure you're within those legal points as well. And all right, let's see here. The next one would be a pretty obvious point, which would just be wearing camo. Make sure you have camo on. And you always see things on Facebook, don't pie face the ducks. So, either take a face mask or face paint. And I think that's something that is essential. And you'll read some guys that are, totally against the face paint and call you Duck Commander Joe or whatever you want to be called. But, a lot of those guys are hunting in pit blinds and, they're never, ever going to be seen. So, it's a different situation than just running out and getting a quick hunt in.
I never understood this. Again, you can kill ducks and stuff without covering your face. It's happened. I do it when I'm hunting blinds, that kind of thing. But if I'm in a natural blind or something where I'm not completely concealed, why on earth would I spend the money to cover my body, legs, jacket, gloves, hat, brush in my blind, brush in the dog, cover up the boat, if you got camo on your gun, whatever the heck you got going on with your camo, and then you leave the brightest, most reflective thing that you're going to show to the ducks completely uncovered. That just doesn't make sense to me. So, I don't care if you're against face paint or not. If you want to use a face mask, if that makes you feel like more of a man or like cooler, whatever, do it. If you like face paint, do that too. I would argue that the face mask is quicker. Maybe, I don't know that to be true. I mean, you could throw face paint on just as quick probably. But the point is, do it. I think you need to cover your face a good bit of time. And, it might not impact every duck, but if I flare one duck because my face isn't covered up, that's one too many in my book. So it's an easy thing that you can do. And I don't understand why people get hung up on the face paint thing and the covering of the face. It just seems to be one of those stigma things. It's an interesting deal.
Yeah. I don't always get that either, but, and this next one might just be relative to, where we grew up to where, the Weather Channel says there's a 10% chance of rain. It's going to rain that day. If it says anything less than 10, it most likely will rain, but it might not. And anything over 10, it's definitely going to rain. So I think this area, Northwest Pennsylvania is kind of the armpit of the United States as far as weather coming off the Great Lakes and just everything dumping right here. But, if there's even a slight chance of rain, I'll just wear my rain jacket as an outer layer. And, I don't even think twice about it. I make sure I'm layered correctly underneath and go about my way. So, making sure that you're protected from the elements, even though it's, if it starts getting cold and you get wet, it's going to be an uncomfortable hour sitting out there.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, and I'm a firm believer of this. The second that I start feeling uncomfortable, whether I'm not comfortable on my stool or my feet are cold or I'm wet or whatever it is, the second that I'm uncomfortable, that clock starts ticking as to when I'm leaving the blind. And, for you to be successful, you have to be there. I mean, you can't kill ducks without being in the field. So obviously my goal is to prolong the time that I can comfortably in the field for as long as possible. That's why I value my camo so much. That's why I've converted essentially to a complete Sitka layering setup. It's worth the investment to me to be comfortable in the field. And, I'm like you, if there's even a threat of rain, I'm going to put my raincoat on because I don't want to get out there and, get poured on, and you bust your tail to get out of work, or you get up early and you hustle and you get there and you do all this kind of stuff. And then, 5 minutes into the hunt, you're soaking wet and you're miserable and you're regretting even coming out there. What good is that? So it doesn't take much to just throw on the right amount, the right clothing and prep for the weather and go out there and, get it done. No big deal.
That's not too bad. We're about 2 or 3 out of 10 that we agree upon, but I think we could both agree.
Yeah.
We could both agree on the next one, having some kind of waterproof case for a phone, and, not for texting or Facebooking or Instagramming, but pretty much for emergency purposes. And like you said, if you're on a boat or in a canoe and you flip or, whatever might happen, things happen, accidents happen. You don't go out and plan to flip a canoe and end up, over your head in water. So having a waterproof case for your phone so you can call for help or, let someone know that what happened, but you are okay and you're making it home. I think that is something that it's bare essential, but it's very essential.
Without a doubt. And unfortunately, we've seen it every year and we will see it this year. The unfortunate truth is that, duck hunting can be a dangerous deal. And guys, every year, have the unfortunate circumstances of, fatalities and things hunting because of the unforeseen. And, you can prepare to a certain level for types of things. And the one thing that you can do to prepare is have an ability to communicate with somebody in the event that you get put in a bad spot. So definitely protecting your phone. I mean, you mentioned Instagram, Facebook, my Lord, if you can't make it 45 minutes on a quick hunt after work or before work without doing social media, there's something else, there's something else going on there. Keep your phone dry. That's the number one priority when you're out there when it comes to your phone. The other thing is, I kind of just lost my train of thought here. But I mean, ultimately the bottom line is, I know where I was going with this. A lot of times we only think to tell someone where we're going, like your wife or your husband or your brother or whatever. You tell them where you're going on the hunt when it's like a big hunt, it's a Saturday morning deal. You're going out for a while, whatever. you're thinking, 30 minutes after work, it's a quick deal, no big deal. Those hunts are equally as important that you let, someone know where you're going to be. One, because you should do that all the time as a matter of practice. But two, these might be spots that you don't always hit. These might be ones that you reserve for just this type of purpose. So if your wife is scrambling to find you after dark, that might not be the first spot that comes to her mind, because she's thinking of where you're going on Saturdays and, on the big hunts that you always talk to her about and tell her about, those kind of things. So it might be a while before someone comes looking for you at that particular spot. So definitely just mention to somebody where you're going to be. Write it on the refrigerator, leave a sticky note, something like that, just so that everyone knows where you're going to be. So in the event you don't show up when they're expecting you to, they know where to, send somebody to look for you.
That's a great point. And one last tip for the bear essential hunting on my end here, but like I said, if I'm walking a long distance or whatever I'm doing, wherever I'm going, I don't want to make more than one trip. And this is just for the bear essential hunting. If you have to carry a lot of decoys into a field on a big goose hunt on a Saturday or whatever, whatever it might be it. But for a bear essential hunt, I want to be able to make one trip. So make sure that, you have a gun with a sling on it. Make sure if you are taking decoys, make sure, put them in a bag that has shoulder straps, just everything so you can fit it on your back. Your hands are free. If you have to climb over stuff or if you're walking through a swamp, that, you can keep your balance without, sticking your gun in the mud. So, my last tip would, anything that you can carry on your back or an ammo belt, something that can go around you, try and keep your hands free is the last tip I have.
Totally agree with you. And, the unfortunate reality is, as waterfowl hunters, a lot of us are kind of, we're sort of, gear happy, for lack of a better term, never have too many decoys. And, we always like the latest and greatest, and we've got a lanyard full of 20 million calls and all this other stuff. Like, we love gear. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody listening to this show of that right now. I love gear, and I love bringing as much of it as I can comfortably do, load in my boat, load in my bag, all that kind of stuff. But when I'm doing the type of hunting that we're talking about today, you gotta get that out of your mind. You're not going to need the teal whistle and this and that and this. You got to just remember, like, you're there for a really brief period of time, and like you said, you don't have time to make multiple trips. You don't have time to be fumbling around. I mean, you want to be able to get in there, sit down, load up, and start shooting. So reevaluate your kit. Make sure you're not taking anything that you don't absolutely need and that you can't live without. And I think that you'll find that there's a lot of things that you can leave at the truck, or, leave at home, for those other bigger hunts where you have a little more time invested, and, can kind of bring the coffee and the grill, and, you're cooking burritos in the blind and things like that. That's not the kind of hunt that we're talking about here today.
No. And, I mean, the truth of it is, I would love to every hunt, be able to set up a grill and do all that kind of fancy stuff, taking my boat out every time. But, the brutal truth is, I have a family and I work a 9-to-5 job. So any free time, like, this is when I can get out, and hopefully, we gave some good tips here for other guys that do the same thing and still want to get out and enjoy before or after work hunts.
Absolutely. And if you guys hunt like this and you've got some other ideas and things, share them with us. We'd love to hear it. Like we said, everybody's situation is a little bit different, and what we deem to be essential, as you can see, Dan and I vary a little bit and have differentiating opinions on what we consider to be essential, and you might even differ from us. So we'd love to hear any kind of suggestions you guys had. Share them with us on Facebook, Twitter, shoot us an email. Whatever you are most comfortable with is good, but we'd love to hear from you guys and how you guys handle these hunts. So hopefully you enjoyed this week's Bear Essentials duck hunting discussion. All right, Dan, I got to be honest with you, man. These episodes where you and I are doing all the talking the whole time, it's like the quickest hour of my week. It just seems like we start talking and bam, I look down at the timer and we're approaching an hour. So anything else that you had on the docket or the agenda that you wanted to cover this week?
No, I think it was a great episode, and, it's almost like hunting with silos. Have confidence in going out on these quick hunts, and I mean, honestly, these are some of my most successful hunts are these before work, shoot 'em up kind of hunts, and not the whole, week long preparation and getting a huge crew out with me. But, I love spending time out in the field, and, sometimes it gets to be every day of the week that I'm going out before work, and, I wouldn't change a thing about it. So, have confidence that you can get out and harvest a couple birds, and if not, you can go out and get some scouting done and enjoy what we're allowed to enjoy here in the great United States of America.
Bam. Yeah, it's one of those things that as a guy who doesn't have an opportunity to really hunt before or after work, it's such a gift to be able to do that. I mean, to be able to go out every day before work, even for 30 minutes or an hour, if you can swing that, my God, that's so amazing. That's an awesome thing that you get to do. I mean, so many, mornings just watching the world wake up and, doing what we love to do. Oh man, it's just I'm so jealous of that. So if you have that opportunity, maximize it. Do everything you can, wake up, you feel like crap, you don't want to get up, force yourself out of bed. I promise you get out to the swamp, you're going to really thank yourself for doing that. And I know every time I've ever forced myself out of bed because I just felt a little too tired, or, maybe the night before was a little too strong, or whatever it was, I've never once regretted getting up and getting out to the swamp and watching, the world wake up and doing what I love. So, if you have that opportunity, by God, take advantage of it and, get out absolutely as much as you can. And, just do it up.
Do it.
We would like to thank the sponsors of this show that at least in part help make the show possible. Sitka Gear, Sport Ear. You can go to Sport Ear's website and use the discount code HP Outdoors to receive 10% off your purchase at checkout. Also, DeLorme, you can use the discount code HP Outdoors. That is case sensitive, all capital letters. You can put that code in at checkout to receive $10 off the Earthmate app. We talked about the app earlier in the show. We'd also like to thank Big Al's Silhouette Decoys and Higdon Outdoors. So if you're in the market for any products that these companies offer, please consider them when you're making your buying decision. We'd like to thank you for making the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast part of your week and for joining us. We hope you guys enjoyed this week's discussion. If you'd like to catch up on any of the old episodes, you can do so on iTunes. If you subscribe through iTunes, all the new episodes will be automatically pushed out to you. If you're so inclined, please feel free to leave a rating and review. We certainly appreciate that. Again, season's firing up across the country. Hope you guys are out having success. I know that we're going to be giving it our best effort here on our side. So till next week, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.